Hey y'all, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a model that we can use to multiply a decimal times a decimal. Now personally, I don't love using these models. I always like to use the standard method whenever I multiply a decimal times a decimal. I think it's a little bit easier for me. But sometimes it's helpful to look at those models so that way we can see what's going on. Let's look, for example, at this one. On this one, I've got 1/10 times 7/10. And the first thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I have a hundredths grid. Now, a hundredths grid, why do I need a hundredths grid if my multiplying numbers, my factors, are in tenths? That's because I'm going to end up with hundredths as my answer. So let's see how that happens. First, I want to shade 1/10 of this whole. And this is in hundredths, so I need to figure out how to mark off 1/10, or 1 part out of 10. Let's look at these columns going up and down. For these columns going up and down, if I count them, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 10 columns going up and down. That means if I were to choose just one of these columns, that would be 1 part out of 10. The same thing as if I go along the side. I can count down the side and I can say I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If I were to shade just one of these rows, that would be 1 part out of 10. The way that we write these fractions as a decimal is to say it's 1/10. So each one of these columns and each one of these rows is 1/10. Now if I want to shade 1/10, all I have to do is I have to shade one whole column or one whole row. Now it doesn't matter which one you choose, whether you choose to do a column, which is up and down, or a row, which is side to side, it's up to you. I'm going to choose to shade in a row here, just because it'll help us later on. So here I've got 1/10, and I'd like to shade in 1/10. So I'm going to shade in one whole row, all the way across. That's 1 out of the 10 parts, or the 10 rows that I would need to make an entire hundredths square. So next, I'm going to say I want to shade these 7/10. But I can't just shade another 7/10 going side to side, because that would be adding 7/10. That would be saying I've got 1/10 and I've got 7/10. Instead, when I multiply, I have to make sure I go perpendicular, or I go across this shaded line. I have to choose the other direction. Because I chose to go side to side with rows first, now I have to go up and down. My 1/10 was side to side. My 7/10 are going to be up and down. So I'm going to shade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, going up and down. To find our answer is actually really simple. All I do is I count up how many of those squares, how many of those little baby hundredth squares are double shaded. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are double shaded. That means that I have 7 hundredths. To write my answer, I'll find the hundredths place, I'll put in a 7, and then I'll put in a 0 to hold my place. My answer is 7 hundredths. Let's try another one. What if I did 3/10 times 7/10? Well, the first thing I have to do is I have to figure out how I want to mark the 3/10. It's up to you whether you do it as rows or as columns. Either way is okay, as long as you do the opposite for the other number. I'm going to choose to mark them as rows. 3/10. That's 1, 2, 3 whole rows. Then I've got 7/10 that I'm multiplying it by. So I'm going to multiply by 7/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7. Now I've marked 3/10 going side to side in my rows, and I've marked 7/10 going up and down in my columns. In order to figure out my answer, all I have to do is count up the ones that are double shaded. So now if I count them up, I can count a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. There are 21 hundredths. So I'm going to find the hundredths place, and I'm going to write in 21, so it ends there. My answer is 21 hundredths. This sometimes gets a little more complicated when I add in a decimal number that also has a whole to it. So let's look at what happens if I have to multiply a decimal number times something that has a whole to it. The first thing I'm going to notice is that I've got 7/10 times 1.2, or 1 whole and 2/10. Because I don't have some extra hundred squares down here, it's already decided, the way this problem is set up, how I have to mark the 1.2. Well, 1.2 is really the same thing as 1 whole and 2/10. So I'm going to shade 1 whole, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10/10 is 1 whole, plus an extra 1 2/10 for a total of 12/10. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my 7/10. 7/10, instead of going up and down, I have to go the other direction, and I'm going to go all the way across. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, to find our answer, it's the same as before. All I have to do is count up all of the squares that are double shaded, all the ones that have a red mark and a blue mark. So I'm going to count those up. And when I count those up, I'm going to count up a total of 84 squares. So that means that since each one of those squares is 1/100th, my answer is 84 hundredths. I'm going to come out to the hundredths, and I'm going to write 84 in there. All right, hope this helped, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.